live today. Today we have Chris Teodoro, and he works with a lot of veterans and in their transition from the military. So he is here today to talk about career gaps and career pivots and different things he's learned along that path. And it is a very involved topic, so I would love to dive in soon. I do have Anthony Garcia here as co-host, and we met a long time ago at an Operation Code event. I'm Jacqueline Wittes, and I just thought this would be a fun idea to try, so here we are. Chris's spouse was actually in the cohort that I went through to end up at Microsoft, the Military Spouse Academy. And that's the way networking works, is you meet one person and then it leads to another, and then we're here having a conversation. So I'm very excited to hear your story too, because you've transitioned from the military in that time, I believe, as well. So would you like to introduce yourself and maybe start out with like, what is a career pivot? What does that look like? And what are some of the challenges?
Yes, for sure. I just want to say thank you again for this opportunity. And by the way, Jacqueline's husband was my mentor when I was transitioning out. So imagine that, right? So again, just want to give you a little intro, then I can start, diving into the career pivot piece. So, I was born in the Philippines and moved here in the US when I was 16. I had to learn a new language, make new friends, right? A new family, and adapt to a new culture. So I want to say, I learned a lot of that transitioning, determination at an early age. So I learned early on to set goals for myself. And, I want to say that I managed to accomplish many of those goals to include successful 24-year military career. So with that, I started as a logistician and then transitioned into the infantry after 9/11, then deployed to Kuwait, then moved to the Iraq invasion soon thereafter. And then after that career in the infantry, I tried out to become my special forces, where I spent most of my last the last 17 years of my career. And then during my time in special forces, I moved into many positions. I was a weapons expert, intelligence, special operations program manager in several U.S. embassies. I was a special forces sergeant, or what we call a team sergeant or senior sergeant for the detachment. And then culminating my SF career as the first sergeant for a headquarters company, where I look after the well-being, discipline of the unit, and oversaw the administrative support of the entire company. And then now I'm currently a project manager at JP Morgan & Chase with a corporate investment banking in the tech side, where I manage software delivery projects and working closely with our product and engineering teams. I'm also pursuing my MBA with Syracuse University. And like Jacqueline stated, I took on a volunteer role as a director for the Military Liaison at Project Management Institute, Tampa Bay chapter. When what we do is we help our military family here transition into project management, whether it's traditional project management or tech project management. And then so to answer your question, Jacqueline, I think for me, what a career pivot is something when you leap into a new position, right? Or an entirely new career, because you have decided that one, it's time to leave that job or find a more attractive one, or you just tired with your old one, right? So for me, it's kind of reinventing yourself again, right? And then maybe finding a more exciting journey. And in my case, that was retirement and then going back into the workforce. So that for me was a career pivot.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's an incredible pivot going from what was your first role in? I forgot the first one. So many things happened after that.
I was a logistician.
That's what it was. You went logistician to infantry and then 17 years special forces and then JP Morgan. That's a hell of like a shift in like direction and like type of people and responsibility.
Absolutely.
What was your first impressions, starting in JP Morgan after all that time?
You know what really helped me is, I guess, kind of step back a little bit. So I did the hiring fellowship with Nike at Tech Ops. So that what really introduced me in, I guess, the civilian industry, right? And working with a lot of tech project managers, product managers, BAs, and I really kind of fell in love in that kind of role. And then I saw the same thing in JP Morgan and Chase, and it's obviously different campuses. You know, I definitely fell in love with Nike's campus, but JP Morgan and Chase, I think we kind of hold ourselves on our own place here in Tampa.
Awesome. So do you have any, as we look at career pivots, oh, we have a hand up already. Scott?
Oh, I was going to ask the question, during that transition period, going from, the Army and Special Forces and going into that fellowship and kind of that transition into technology, I work with a lot of transitioning teachers, and there's one thing that's common across them, is a big fear, that the notion of, are my skills transferable? I think they are. I know they are. I'm not sure. How do I reframe? So I'm curious what your journey was like, switching from that, from one mindset into tech.
You know what? That's a great question, right? So definitely the fear was there for me at the very start, right? Even going into like maybe a few months into my transition, because as you can imagine, it was my entire life, right? 24 years in the military. And at some point I was kind of still enjoying the job. I didn't really want to leave, but a big part of me at that point really just want to focus on my family. And that's a big motivation for me to really just, leave drop the uniform, right? I'm actually have a 10-month-old baby right now. So yeah, enjoying this new phase of my life, right? Raising another family again. But to answer your question, I think really, being in special forces and growing that environment really taught me the values of adaptability, being a self-starter, right? Taking responsibility, and, really kind of learn to achieve difficult and time-sensitive tasks and projects. So I kind of took that and then put that in my transition as well. And then, I mean, I hate saying this, owning transition, but I definitely had that mindset going in. And so, I talked to many mentors, right? I went on and took took advantage of a lot of the veteran services organization, kind of figuring out what's out there, and then did a lot of one-on-one with, informational interviews with so many companies, right? And so I think that really kind of helped me understand what I want to do, and then asking myself what I love to do, right? What you love doing, what are you good at, who and who knows you, which is essentially networking, right? And then the functional knowledge of that career you're going into, meaning knowing the specifics of that job, what you need, right? So whether you need to take certifications, whether you need to take internship to understand more about that, particular industry. So those are kind of the ways that I kind of went into to get into my transition mindset or pivot mindset.
Thank you.
That's awesome. So since career pivots can be difficult, like we can just call it that. It is hard. You get a lot of rejections. You have to learn how to sell that value of who you are and those translatable skills, which we'll get into. Are there any top of mind aspects that someone should consider when looking at a career pivot?
I would say, for me, you need to get that clarity, right? Before you make a leap into whatever that position is, you need to be clear whether it is that time for you to make that leap, right? If you're not happy with your current situation, just ask yourself, right? Is it what I do, or who I do it with, or for who I do it with, right? So if you're unhappy at your job because of what you do, then it's time to move on to another one. Or if you're frustrated with who you work for or with, then maybe it's time to find a new job. But again, you don't always have to be pivoting if you're not happy, right? So again, I'm just kind of understanding, get some clarity, so you can kind of frame those decisions as you decide to pivot into a new career.
I love that. Like just kind of taking time to find your why. I actually did a post on that this week. Is one of the first things that I did was make a vision board and put it in front of my face, because it gets hard and it's easy to just say, I'm done with this. Nobody's ever going to see the value, because you get rejection or crickets. Crickets, I think, are worse than rejection. I'd rather just the clarity of a no. So I would look at that board and be like, okay, it's another no, but I'm doing it because this matters. I'm doing this because this matters. And that really, that clarity you just talked about helped a lot.
That's great, Jack. And actually, I have a whiteboard next to me. It's the same thing. I use it all the time. Whenever I want to get some stuff done, I put it on the board and just kind of look at it all the time. Say, okay, what am I doing that's stopping me from doing this thing that I wanted to do, right? So
I think for me, can I chime in?
Yeah.
I think for me, one of the most impactful purchases I've made in the last year cost me $3, a journal and a set of pens, and having them next to my bed. And when I have that doubt and that fear, like for some reason, I think not all people, but for some people, when something gets written down, it's a lot more real than just saying it, because once we say it, it's gone. But when we write it down, we can reference it, we can go back to it. And I've also heard a lot of people that I coach and work with say that that's been very impactful for them, having that tangible piece of paper with words on it.
Or even like you could jot down successes for a minute, like, did somebody say yes to your informational interview? That's not a no. So write that thing down and kind of inventory the good parts of it. That I guess part of it is we have to coach ourselves a lot, which makes it harder because we can get in our own heads on how difficult it could be. So translatable skills. Can we just dive straight into this one? Because this is, I know it's Military Spouse Appreciation Day, so thank you, military spouses who are here. We do a lot of things as military spouses, especially if we're moving and we are, find a thing here, we volunteer for a thing here. And my resume, if we look at the cumulative thing, is still a hot mess because I did this and I did this and I did this and I did this. And how do we make that kind of translatable skill, cohesive story that we can highlight that this volunteer opportunity taught me this, and this, and if I didn't know how to manage a thing, it would have flopped. Like it would have been a mess. So
yeah, that's a great point, Jacqueline, because I definitely mentored several military spouses over here, right, during our outreach program, and it's unfortunate that we're not kind of highlighting a lot of those volunteer roles that you've taken, but they're huge because, again, as you mentioned, whether you're conducting a project or something else, there's definitely a deliverable that came out of that, and you can highlight those deliverables, and then the intangible piece that you've done, whether it's setting a timeline or whatever that goals is that you've set for yourself, and then again kind of highlighting the outcome of that volunteer role that you did. I think that's huge, right? Because again, for I think we're going to talk about this later on with the resume, right? We need to highlight all the metrics, right? The key metrics that we've done in the past. And I think that's something I've learned too, as I pivot into many roles, and especially transitioning into the civilian industry, is translating a lot of the stuff that I did in the military into a cohesive way that a hiring manager can look at it and say, okay, I understand what you were talking about, right? Because if not, right, that resume is probably just going to be, they're just going to look at it and probably just push to the side, right? So, and I got to that by talking to a lot of folks, by networking, by finding those mentors, by asking people about their jobs, talking to them about their journey, and then again utilizing those to kind of, you know, change or update my, my resume or the way I speak to, to the hiring managers or the interviewing teams.
Another interesting thing I was thinking about when you're saying that, Chris, is just doing the volunteering work teaches you something. Like whether you can translate it yourself, the confidence in the interview of like, yeah, I ran a budget. Like I know how to run a schedule. I know how to get 300 people into one place at one time. Like you actually learn something. So that's one of the things I think a lot of folks understand when you do volunteer work, especially if you manage an event, where someone's paying money there, you're giving money back to the charity, and like you're accounting for that whole spend. Yeah, that's the whole cycle that doesn't differ too much from if you're doing it for money.
Yeah. And I know we've had even past guests before talk about the value of if you really are trying to pivot into a new industry, look for volunteer opportunities in that, particularly tech. Like there are always nonprofits that just need somebody to go in and edit their website for them. See, like if you are just learning to code, they often don't have the budget to hire, especially in this tech world where the cost for someone to come in and be on staff or even to hire vendors could be astronomical for them. You're able to then go in, and especially if it's a cause you just love and you're excited to help them out, you can help with physical networking if that's what you're getting into. You could code a feature, you could get on work, like if they have a WordPress site, sometimes just adding a plugin can be a little draining if you're only partially tech savvy, and probably very draining if you're not. So, and that builds an opportunity for you to put that, like I worked with such and such charity organization and did this thing, and you can, and sometimes they're a mess because they've tried to hobble things together, we need a website. Nobody can compete without a website anymore. So let's build this thing. And I know, Anthony, you've talked about that before as well.
Yeah, no, I mean, the career pivot piece in itself, I used to talk to this guy I worked with a long time ago. He moved from healthcare to tech, and he was a program manager in healthcare doing nothing related to technology. But he made a shift into risk and compliance in the technology side. And what I learned from his process is, yes, it does mirror very similar. Career pivots and military transition are very similar. But I didn't really think about what one of the key differences is, and so something you said earlier, Chris. It's like from the military side, you come out of your transition with, at least I did, with so much confidence. Like, I could do anything in the world.
Yeah.
It's like attack everything because there's nothing that you don't think you can do. Where when you transition as a teacher, or like my friend that was in healthcare, he didn't attack it like that because it was like, well, what do I know? Like it was just so I think that's one aspect that could definitely change your view on it. If like, don't pivot into like whatever you can get, pivot into some ambition, like pursue something you don't think you could have gotten. The excitement will show, like, pursuing that effort.
I love your point on the compliance, because we need that in tech in a big way. So if you, and military spouses are probably great at compliance because we're used to being told you must do this in this little mold, and a lot of people don't love it. So if you are one of those who likes to read a little legalese and then figure out how it adapts to a company and how they need to implement it to be compliant and legal, that's a great opportunity to learn and help as well. Scott, you have your hand up.
Yeah, just in terms of like the compliance thing and the nonprofits, I think what I've seen working with some people who are trying to transition is coming from like a teacher background, education background. There's that humility, and that in moments there's like a lack of confidence and a lack of self-esteem and this notion of defeat. So when it comes to transitioning, I know coming from a military background, you had mentioned, the confidence, and I mean your career is impressive. Were there ever moments where you lacked confidence going into the transition, and how did you combat that, if you did?
Oh yes, absolutely, right. I mean, and like Jacqueline had mentioned, transitioning is scary because it's like I mentioned it. I mean, going from 24 years in the military into an industry that I don't know anything about. But And so I think to kind of alleviate a lot of those fears, you know, I I actually look for mentors. Again, I keep saying it, right? I I talk to a lot of folks, and so I can make those sound decision to kind of help me. And I think going back to what Anthony has stated, start your career pivot with the end in mind, meaning develop your story based on your target, right? So whether it's expanding your network strategically to get the real results or leveraging somebody's career expertise, like seeking mentors, right, to increase your chances of seeing a successful career path. I think I just kind of want to piggyback on what Anthony said.
So when you talk about that target and reaching that target, I mean, from what I've seen, people set their target, that dream job, the high salary, flexible pay, like all of the stuff that tech is attracting people with. So when it comes to that target and the steps along the way, like, did you ever feel like you took a step back or had to lower expectations, or was it just full speed ahead?
I think, I went full speed ahead after talking to a lot of the mentors, right? So I'm like, I can do this, right? But definitely there's, I've ran to many obstacles as well, as Jacqueline had mentioned. I mean, I've sent how many resumes and many job applications that, I, I was turned down or didn't hear anything, and again, here I am thinking that hey, I'm special forces, I can do this. If I can go overseas and tackle all this challenging, complex situation, I can do this transition. But that's not the case, right? So it's just I don't want to say lower your expectations, but manage those expectations, right?
I think Anthony has, you've talked to that a little bit, like maybe sometimes you have to take a small step back. And I know he got to where he ended up through vendor roles as well. And
Yeah,
kind of
no, I like the
building.
expectations thing you said, manage, because I believe in that so much. And this is how I like to categorize things. This is how I did my job search years ago. It was like, I have my tier one. That is my preferred. This is NASA. This is Google. This is like really high level things right here. This is where I know people. This is where I know this guy that I went to school with. This guy was in the army with. I met this guy here. This is my. I actually have a path to contact with somebody. And so then there was my tier two. This is everything I have control over. And then my fallback. If I wanted to go be a project manager in general construction because nothing else worked out, I could go back that. And that's a good pay. It was that safety spot for me. And that was how my whole thing was arranged. So as I hit some of the things in my tier one, tier two kind of fell away. But then I got some things that didn't work out. So it's being both super ambitious, but being realistic and like, look, it's a recruiting process. There's 1,000 people applying to jobs. Like, just be real with the odds there. And how do you increase your own success? I know referrals is like, you jump to the head of line in so many circumstances when you have someone who's like, I know this person, and at Google especially, go apply in their portal. You're never going to get a response back. Have a referral, you get a response back in 48 hours. Like, it's part of the policy of referrals. So like some companies are stricter and have that enforcement on their side, and some don't. Like Oracle doesn't have a really strong referral policy. It helps, but that's part of that managing expectations thing.
And I love that tiered approach, right? Because I didn't really look at it from that perspective, but definitely use that approach. So during I think I forgot to mention, after I retired in the military, retiring during the pandemic was even, it's, I don't know what I was thinking, right?
Yeah.
But I was full speed ahead. I was like, okay, I'm doing this. But yeah, there's there were a lot of crickets on the tier one companies that I applied to and the tier two companies. So what I did, I went to my fallback plan, like what Anthony was talking about. I took a contracting job for a year here in Tampa Bay at MacDill Air Force Base because I knew I'm gonna get it. It's something that I've done in my career in NASA. I knew all the folks in there, so I can get a job right away. And then at the same time, while I was working full time, I didn't stop networking. I didn't stop talking to folks. I was still, looking for what I wanted to do, which is transition into tech, which that's where I landed here in JP Morgan and Chase.
That's a good point, Chris, of like taking that job, because I think sometimes you extend that transition because you're still chasing, when the truth is you can take that job. You don't have to tell anyone. You don't have to put it on your LinkedIn. You don't have to say anything. You just are in that job until you find the job you want. And you're not as stressed because you're getting paid, like, you know, your
Right.
head thing. And again, nobody needs to know. Like, I drove a truck for 6 months during my transition while I was trying to make ends meet. I don't have truck driver on my LinkedIn. It was just a part of my life that I had to make things work, and that was then.
I have that same thing where, you know, I was a cake decorator for a while. I was a personal trainer, you know, thinking, and you know, that's part of why I wanted to get back into tech. I'm like, I am working a whole lot of hours for peanuts, truly. But the funny thing is that when I was in the interview for Microsoft, I was interviewing with a product manager, and you know, I was very curious about what do you do as a product manager? And as he's talking to me, I started realizing I had been a product manager before, and it was in personal training. It's just a human product, but the concepts are the same. Like, somebody presents with a problem, which may not be the actual problem. You know, somebody says, I need to lose weight. There's actually a pain point that you have to drive into first. You know, is it because you can't go up and down stairs, or can you not keep up with your kids, or did you get a health diagnosis? Like, what is actually causing them to be in front of me that day? And then once you get to that root, we can start saying, well, now how do we build something that can address the actual problem? And it's not about a number on a scale. It's about, can you have better mobility going up and down stairs? And there are specific things you do with that person to help strengthen around the knees. And it was in the interview when I had that aha moment. So if you could do that ahead of time before you're in the interview, like actually pause and write down the things you've done in any of the volunteer roles. And I mean, I wrote down a resume for myself where I included grocery shopping weekly, because that's asset management. And really just looked at each of those tasks, and then I Googled power verbs. And you guys, if you come regularly, you hear this all the time, but I Googled power verbs. So when I'm looking at grocery shopping, or doing a military move, that's all management, often management in a crisis, because we weren't expecting, oh yeah, you're actually moving in 2 weeks, not 6 months. We had that situation happen too. So each of those things are leadership, organization, cross-team collaboration, and those all match something. So when you get those resume power verbs in front of you, you can start being creative. I'm not saying lying. I'm saying just really look at it from a slightly different angle. And in this, where I was a parent director at my kids' play, how did I demonstrate leadership? How did I demonstrate performing under pressure? All of these things. And when you start identifying that in yourself and the skills that were actually necessary to accomplish the job, then it builds your self-confidence. And so when you're in there, you're like, I've done product management before. It was a person, and my product was not tech, but it was a person. The process is still the same. So, and that helped a lot, which I guess could kind of pivot us into maybe resume. Like, how do you build that resume to then show, like, yeah, I was a volunteer here, but that means I'm going to be amazing under pressure or tension. You know, tech can be stressful sometimes, but probably less stressful to military spouses, because nobody is getting actually shot at here. Like, we're just like, this is not life or death. This is just a blip, and we go through a lot of blips.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna pass this on to Anthony. While I do have some resume, definitely resume background. My resume went into, I think, going on 200 transformation now. Right?
No, I've gone through a lot myself, and I look at resumes every day. Every day, I have a team of about 4 recruiters that are outsourcing and screening candidates on a daily basis. And so I get review on certain candidates before they're submitted. And so every day a different resume comes across. And what I find interesting is however you created your resume, I am not presenting your resume in that manner. I am taking it out and recruiters are putting it into a Word document with bigger font, and that's how I look at it. So if you put blue in there, if you put your picture in there, if you did anything to it, that's very nice. But it's not, I can't, like, as the person who's reviewing lots of them, my recruiters build a summary and put it in a Word document again. And it doesn't look pretty, but like an old person who has bad vision, that's kind of like how I like to review these things. It's very easy to see bigger font.
Yeah.
So the vast majority of resumes, it's best to be clear on what you did. And that in this role, my responsibility was X. I helped support these things. I managed, you're describing a project, to give dollar amounts in there or amount of measurable impacts. So like mine are easy because construction is a project many times. So when you're describing projects, it's like my role in this project was to lead all electrical delivery for a $20 million program that went over 9 months. We were delayed by 42 days of rain and still managed to come in on time. Like describing what I did there, but so I guess resume is keep it simple. You don't need a picture, you don't need fonts, you don't need color backgrounds, but you do need clear, concise font. Like, I guess more boring, just white and black font,
Would you say it's true that you only spend like a minimal amount of time even looking at resumes, or
I spend more time discussing the summary about the recruiter had with the candidate. So like for me, the email comes across and I scan through it. I'm like, oh yeah, that's great. Or like, hey, it was kind of a reach here. What's your summary? What's your take on it? And so that's the whole conversation there. If we're talking less than 10 seconds on a resume, now I'm talking to the recruiter or I'm reading their summary and it's like, hey, we talked to this on this date. We think they're special because of these reasons. So like they pull out what's important because in our screening documents, it's like, ask this question, inquire about project experience. So it is interesting being on the hiring side of the mass reviewing of resumes and what stands out. Because none of these people even have referrals. So it's really about something about your resume has to say you did the job. Like I guess that's the best way I can put it. Like if you read that job description, it said that you were in charge of this, something in there has to stand out right away that says like, oh yeah, they can do that. Even if it wasn't product manager to product manager, like Jacqueline was saying, as a personal trainer, it's like I trained 62 people, helped an average of 20% in weight loss, brought in like $8,000 in fees, and that kind of breakdown.
I love your point here. The star format on resume is also a great way to format it as well. And if you don't know what the star format is, we'll make sure we can cover that. Scott, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I wanted to double down. I had some thoughts on resumes and I wanted to double down on referrals. I've been in tech, we talked about it last time. I've been in tech for 13 plus years as a software engineer, senior leadership, team leader, tech lead. And I've been part of the hiring process for tech. And when it comes to resumes, a lot of times we are looking for that experience or something that is transferable, and those numbers stand out, as Anthony was saying. So instead of manage the group of people, managed 500 people and received a 4.9 rating on Google. Something like that is more impactful than a vague statement about managing people. But when it comes to the notion of trying to change industries, I think, as was stated before, you throw that resume into the pile and you're competing against people who have industry experience. I think networking, having these chats from a point of view of, hey, I just want to learn. And then somewhere down the line, an opening comes up and you have that in for like, oh, hey, I saw this position open up. How do you feel about referring me? And those referrals in my tech experience, they get pushed to the top of the list because somebody is vetting for you already. So there's a bit of there's that vet. And then in addition to resume, with cover letters, a lot of those generic cover letters, and you can kind of tell, they would just kind of be dismissed. So if there's a position you really want, taking the time to write a cover letter tailored to that specific one. And not every position, because the time and energy for that is crazy. But if there's something that really stands out to you, taking the time to write a cover letter can really help push that narrative of, I might not have the industry experience, but here's all the things that I do and am passionate about. And sometimes that can help somebody stand out.
No, that's a great point, Scott, because that's how I got my job, right? Is through a referral. And again, it's, we keep saying it's the networking piece. So like I connected with, 5 or more JP Morgan employees, and I, talk to them and ask them, what they do day in, day out, right? What do they love about the company or the firm, tools that they use, that type of stuff. And then just kind of having those conversation. And that kind of got into, hey, do you have a resume ready? Give me your resume and I'll, pass it on to, this person. And then next thing you know, I got a call a couple of days later for an interview. And then a week went by and another interview and got an offer the next day, right? And so it's pretty quick, but it definitely it was because it was a long process of networking, talking to people, just getting out there. I call it getting out of the building. Get out of the building and talk to folks, and that's what I tell our many mentees over here. I hate to say the word network too sometimes, because you need to connect with people. Once you talk to that mentor or someone, follow up with them, every so often. So like my mentors in Nike, almost every month we talk, just kind of follow up on what's going on in Nike. And I'm doing the same thing on what's going on my side here. And I have like 3 or 4 mentors at Nike that I, kind of follow up to from, time to time. So just keep those connections open, right? And just, be authentic of and what you're doing.
Yeah, that's also been my experience, where having these conversations, just being authentic. And then at some point that question, hey, shoot me a resume. And it's like, whoa, I wasn't even expecting that, but here you go. If there's a place, then. So I think that works.
Yeah, it kind of brings up a little bit of in this career pivot, you have to kind of be your own salesperson. So does anybody have like insights as far as like sales techniques? Like if you were going to try and get someone to buy your thing, that kind of could translate into also a career pivot.
Yeah, well, the sales piece could get you the conversation with the person you need to start talking to. It's like that mentor that Chris is talking about is so important. Kind of to sell yourself to a mentor to be like, hey, come spend time with me.
Yes.
Let me call you every month for an hour, please. That's the sales side first, I think.
Yeah.
I think people can be very intuitive and aware of being sold to. And I would say just that genuineness, that authenticity, just being honest and open and saying, hey, I wanted to learn a bit more about some of what you do. And, I'm not looking for a referral right away, but I really just want to have a chat. Can I buy you a coffee? Can we jump on a Zoom and I'll send you a Starbucks gift card? And a lot of people I've noticed go, don't worry about the gift card. Yeah, we could jump on a Zoom, because they want to help. So, getting that foot in the door and just having conversations, I think, can be so impactful in a career pivot.
Yeah. And Chris, did you have any insights on that?
Yeah, so just kind of want to answer on that answer, kind of piggyback on what Scott stated. Like for me, I would, talk to anyone, to share my stories, right? Provide them some advice, or kind of show them, some of the things that worked for me. But to answer your question, Jacqueline, I think for me, I've kind of used the same techniques I've learned in my military career when I'm dealing with the tribal leaders in Afghanistan, or I'm dealing with the U.S. ambassadors at the at the embassy, or dealing with some of the our stakeholders in other countries. Right? Is again going back to those being yourself, understanding what's in it for them. Right? If you understand what's in it for them, and then you can come up with a better strategy on how you get that conversation going. And I think that's what it is that conversation, right? Once you start that conversation, that impactful conversation, that person is going to remember you and say, wow, that was great. I want to talk to him again or her again, right? So those are the things that kind of sparks a lot of those.
I really love that. And I love that you highlighted kind of I try and stress to try not to lead with an agenda. And I know that's hard when you're talking about career stuff, right? Like there may be financial pressure to just get something that can help pay bills. But this is a longer term game in a lot of ways. So there's been a lot of insights, like, can you take a vendor role and let that, even if it's a hidden thing for a while, it's getting you experience, it's getting something to talk about in future interviews while you still network. And then if you're able to pay the bills, the pressure is kind of off. So it's not a desperation lead when you're asking. It's kind of a, hey, I really am interested in what you have to say in this thing. I loved your post on Tuesday. It really spoke to me. Things like that. They matter more because I think Scott was saying it was people can kind of smell the sale if you're after it. And I get that in my inbox all the time. Like, hey, find a job for me. Like, is Microsoft hiring? And I'm like, yes, we're hiring. And there's a career portal. I have no idea what you want to do.
I think a good question to ask, and this is part of the coaching stuff and these open-ended hows and whats, and asking ourselves those questions. So one thing I'd say about, quote unquote, making the sale or selling yourself or trying to get a foot in the door is, how would you want somebody to do that to you? If they wanted to learn about your career, how would you want them to approach you with that conversation? And thinking about that might shape the way you approach somebody else or we approach somebody else.
Right. We're getting to where we have like about 15 minutes left, a little less than that. Does anybody have any questions they'd like to bring up?
Again, we could circle back to Nicole's question from the beginning.
Yes.
Just to expound on it a little more. So you mentioning, how about we just start over from what you were saying, Nicole, and we'll try to go in from there.
Thank you.
Yes, so my question was, so a tiny bit of background. I'm a military veteran, have limited civilian experience, and then have a long employment gap for parenting. So I'm trying to find a way, with lots of part-time and volunteer experience during that time that's hopefully translatable. So I'm trying to create a cohesive story around all of these really different, like I was a nuclear engineer in the Persian Gulf on deployment, managing chemistry and radiological controls. And then I was helping parents of newborns adjust to their new life, like very disparate experiences, and trying to make a cohesive story.
Well, one thing you should know, I literally just got a resume earlier today, and the guy was an avionics technician for like 8 years, and he's been a preschool teacher since, and he declined to get into a data center technician role. And so I was looking, and I was like, clearly experienced guy, like has tons of experience from the military, and now he's just been a preschool teacher for the past few years and an arts instructor. And I didn't think anything negative about it. I was just like, that's interesting. Like if he has the patience to deal with children and now he wants to go deal with construction workers, I don't like, this is far easier. The children's thing is more challenging. So I don't think he even thought about it. I mean, obviously he doesn't know I'm talking about them as a random resume today, but that might be your thing. You had an impressive role in the military. Expound upon it. Like you clearly had the aptitude to do that role, and then you became, parent, and life happened.
That kind of reminds me a little bit of somebody had shared, and I wish I knew I could give credit to who said it, but the thing that we think is so mundane about our life may be something really fascinating to almost anybody else. People love for the curtain to be peeled back a little bit. So when you're talking about a preschool resume, I'm like, that person is a rock star on deep breathing, like, or crisis management, or fishing things out of places that crayons shouldn't be, or name the thing. Like, why are there 500 crayons in the air conditioner vent today? I don't know, but this is my life. So, but it all, again, it kind of it can translate into a technical role because they also did curriculum planning and managed to get however many kids to sit still for a story. That may be similar to construction work for, I don't know, like, is everybody here? Do we have everybody listening?
when it comes to stories, I had one of my leaders in tech. I was doing a presentation on communication during one of our dev talks, where a bunch of developers get together and some developers present a talk on a technical topic or something they're passionate about. And one thing he told me was, you have your start and end, but throughout your story, there's this vein that runs through it. Like, what is the story you want to tell? How do you want people to feel when reading it? What are you trying to portray in your story? And thinking about that vein that runs through it, perhaps that's the cohesion aspect you had asked about, but that was something that was impactful to me in creating presentations, at least. So when it comes to your life story, perhaps that's something that could assist.
So I dropped a link on the chat, right? It's the Armed Services. Let's see, forget the Armed Services Arts Partnership. So what they do is they have different programs, right? Storytelling, comedy, writing, improv, and it's free for military veterans and military spouses. And it's a 6-week program, and they teach you how to craft your story well. It's a nonprofit organization, right? And that now they have online programs, because before it's just based out of the East Coast, in the DC area. So I think something you may want to leverage and see. I definitely I recommend them. I met the program manager at our what do you call it, the student veteran organization meeting that we had here in Orlando, and I was impressed with her pitch essentially on the program. So check it out.
Yeah, that's
Well, thank you.
That sounds exactly like what you're looking for earlier, Nicole. How do I learn to do this? So as we're getting close to time, Chris, did you have anything you wanted to, like, we didn't cover, or something that you would love to end with here as we?
Sure, yeah. I think the last thing I want to say is, when you're going into a career pivot or transition, really find things that you don't want to do instead of what you want to do, right? Like for me, that's kind of like how I approach it. Like, I don't want to do this again, so I'm going to try to avoid things like that, in the industry. Like, for example, I don't want to deploy again, right? So I don't want to go overseas because I want to focus on my family. So I check that box. Or I don't want to I want an office with a window, right? Simple things like that. Right? Again, just finding out those things that you don't want, and then that's going to kind of help you out finding those things that you want to do. So
I love that point. When I was being trained in the cloud server stuff, I started thinking, I'm not sure if this is actually speaks to me as far as what I want to do. So it was really an interest, and some of it was because a lot of the jobs were going to be phone tech support for problems that were happening, and I absolutely cannot stand to be on a phone. And if you put that job where I am there on a phone all day long, I might last 2 weeks before I just like completely stress out. Like I can't, there's not a part of me that can handle this. So I love that point, and it's one that's rarely talked about, is maybe find out what you don't want to do before you pursue something.
Yeah,
thanks again for this opportunity.
Sorry, I was just saying, like, that is such a valid thing, because I didn't think about, for me, I didn't want to work for a company that only had a location in that city or that state. I don't know why that was a big thing for me leaving the military, I guess it makes sense. But it was like, I wanted a group that wanted a global footprint. And that was literally the only thing I was searching for. If you only did work in the US, I don't know. But that's what I knew I wanted. And that's a lot of the reason I'm doing the things I'm doing. So,
I think
yeah.
I think one thing that's important during that is realizing that it is a bit of a process. It is a bit of trial and error. There might be something that's attractive, and then you actually start doing it for a bit, learning about it, and you go, yeah, this isn't really for me. And that process can take time, whether that's a week or 6 months or a year, who knows? But for different people, that process of really trial and error and trying to dial in on what it is you want can take a bit of time to figure out.
Yeah,
I really
absolutely.
like that because I
Yeah.
could kind of say my first role at Microsoft was I learned so much, but after a while, I'm like, I'm not sure if this is what I want to build a career on. For personality pieces of I'm not sure I love this. So, but I still did it for 2.5 years because I was learning so much constantly, and like that value that came into my brain that I can now translate into other things. It was worth it. It was worth the struggle a bit. So even if you have to take that first thing to get in the door and you're like, I know this isn't what I'm meant to do long term, latch on to the learning. And I had to focus on that all the time. Oh, but well, this part is really difficult, but I'm learning this and this skill, and it really still comes into play now when on the role that I'm in the role that I'm in now.
I think
Yeah.
the note.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think that's important. The notion of realizing that some things are stepping stones.
Yeah, for sure. I really love the trial and error, right? So as my mentor told me once, once you go into this transition, it's a journey. It's never ending, right? I mean, you want to keep that door open because you're not sure what another opportunity is going to come. That's probably going to be the right one or the perfect one, right? So who knows?
And you may find you end up having to still pivot again, even just doing something else in the field that you're in. Like tech, you can pivot into all sorts of different things, I mean, like my company just redefined all of our roles. We all used to be program managers, and they're like, no, we want to get more specific. So now some of you are product managers, some of you are technical program managers. I'm like, okay,
Yeah,
now I get to
I-
learn what I'm doing.
I think it's. I think
What
in
do they
smaller
think I should be doing?
companies. I think in smaller companies, you have the opportunity to be a bit more generalist, and you get to learn different facets and different aspects of the industry. And then as you gain that experience, and you find new opportunities, or not bounce around, but you find these other opportunities. Bigger companies tend to be a lot more specialized, where you want to do strictly data analysis. We have a position that is full-time data analysis, but it takes time to really garner the skills, improve the skills, hone the skills to go into those very, very specialized roles. And it takes time to find what specialized role
Yes.
you'd like to go into.
Yeah, especially at this market, right?
Right. Well, Chris, thank you for being here today. I really appreciate your insights and any last thoughts by anyone in the room. I will say that's a no. I'm going to go ahead and pause our recording here.
Yeah, thanks for joining today, Chris. It was really cool hearing about your background.
No, thank you.